I've taken all the money, and I'm with Mark." It wasn't a confession. It wasn't an apology, just a declaration. It appeared on my phone screen precisely as I was reviewing deployment orders for our temporary garrison in Arizona. Seconds later, a second message came in, this time from the bank. "Alert! Your joint account has been withdrawn. 118,000. I froze. Everything in my office turned to stone. The map, the reports, the wall clock, even the air. I've been through 7 major operations, led men across the desert at night, made life and death calls using nothing but radio code and sheer focus, but no one, not a single trainer, not a field manual, ever prepared me for those 8 words. My name is Colonel James Carter. I'm 54 years old, commanding officer of the 47th Infantry Brigade. A soldier in every sense, precise, accountable, emotionally contained. Where I show up, order follows. But now the place I lived, the place I called home, had turned into a battlefield without warning. Sarah was my wife of 15 years. Beautiful, intelligent, the kind of woman who stood in the rain, waving goodbye as I boarded the plane to Afghanistan. She cried, wrote me letters, swore she'd wait. And now she'd drained our savings, dropped a single message, and vanished with another man. Mark, what a joke of a name, a gym guy, good-looking, cheap. I met him at last year's Christmas gathering. Mom, Sarah introduced us. He was polite, respectful, even called me sir. Now he's sleeping in my bed, beside my wife, living off the money I spent 10 years building. I didn't smash the phone, I didn't yell, I didn't cry. I stood up, opened the bottom drawer, and pulled out a black folder labeled Contingency Plan, Internal Betrayal Protocol. I wrote it 3 years ago, around the time Sarah began asking unusual questions. Banking passwords, spending habits, backup email addresses. I didn't jump to conclusions. But the instincts of a seasoned commander told me something was off in the system. In the Army, there's no such thing as being too cautious. There is only survival, or not. I picked up the folder, recalibrated my breath. From this moment forward, I was no longer the betrayed husband. I was the commanding officer, initiating counterattack. There's one rule every field commander learns the hard way. No system is truly sealed. Every structure leaks somewhere. The only question is when and whether you're watching closely enough to notice. Marriage, in the end, is a system like any other. I can't pinpoint exactly when Sarah began to change, but I felt it, the way a soldier senses the air before an ambush. No sound, no movement, just a silence that lingers too long and tells you something's coming. Sarah began withdrawing from our conversations. Her replies got shorter. Her gaze didn't hold. Her questions no longer circled around us. They circled around numbers. Are you still using that investment account? What's that backup email again? Why's your password so complicated? As a soldier, I was trained to know that repeated anomalies aren't coincidence. They're signals, and signals are meant to be decoded. I didn't confront her. I observed. I tracked her behavior the way I'd map a battlefield. Every shift, every change, from how she left home more often during lunch breaks to how she locked her phone faster when I entered the room, got recorded in a small notebook, not for accusation, but for pattern recognition. One day, I saw 2 takeout coffee cups in her car. She claimed she was going to class alone. Another time, our credit cards showed a charge at an Italian restaurant we'd never been to together. I didn't feel jealous. I didn't get angry. I constructed a hypothesis. I started acting like I was prepping for an ambush, not on foreign soil, but in my own house. I built a folder and labeled it in bold, Family-Level Contingency Plan. I rechecked every asset in my name, private accounts, access rights, independent investments. I began unbinding shared financial links, not to hide, but to fortify. I met David, my older brother, at a cafe near base. I didn't mention Sarah. I just asked him to co-sign a financial authorization letter for emergencies. David didn't ask questions. He used to work in construction, and like me, he understood. If someone installs a hidden door and doesn't say why, they probably smell smoke. A week later, Sarah asked, if I ever needed to withdraw money urgently, could I use your OTP codes? I looked at her. I didn't lie. I didn't answer. I asked, how urgent are we talking? She smiled slightly. You know, just in case. That moment sealed it. This wasn't a crack. It was a calculated breach. One night I woke earlier than usual. Light from Sarah's phone glowed through the sheets. The name on the screen, Mark J. She typed something, sent it, then deleted the message, unaware I was watching. I returned to my office, opened the folder, added a line in block letters, objective, no confrontation, prioritize information control. I didn't need Sarah to confess. I didn't need to catch her in the act. I needed control. And to gain control, I had to know exactly who I was dealing with. When you suspect someone inside an operation, you don't accuse them. You shadow them. You study. You verify. And then you strike, clean, precise, on your terms. I reorganized my desk, notebook on the left, contingency folder on the right, a half-finished cup of coffee in the middle. Everything was in place, like mission gear laid out before dawn. I hadn't said a word to Sarah. She still thought I didn't know. We still shared the same bed, the same dinners, as if nothing had changed. Because in war, the strong man isn't the one who shoots first. It's the one who knows exactly when to end it. I don't believe in emotional reaction. A good soldier doesn't jump from the trench just because he hears a strange sound. He waits, watches, and when he knows for sure he's not walking into a trap, then he moves. I had watched long enough. Every time Sarah pulled away from our conversations, every vague message, every strange financial request, I quietly added another brick to the plan I had started building 3 years ago. I called it Contingency Plan, Phase 2. Phase 1 was defense, protecting what was mine, securing my data, separating assets. Phase 2 was control, identifying risk, gathering evidence, isolating the threat, and preparing a response the moment the timing was right. I started by contacting my personal attorney, a woman I once worked with during a military benefits dispute. She didn't pry. She only needed 3 facts. What are you worried about? What do you want to keep? And what are you willing to lose to protect what's left? My answer was simple. I don't want to lose anything else, and I'm not acting for revenge. After 3 meetings, we finalized a set of protective legal drafts, a private asset inventory, independent ownership documentation, a motion for emergency asset protection, and a freeze order for any suspicious joint transfers. At the same time, I asked my brother David to reach out to contacts in real estate and notarization. I needed to know who owned the gym Sarah kept visiting and whether any shared properties were being used as collateral. It took just 3 days. The findings were clear. A gym called Core Zone was owned by Mark Jenkins. The previous owner was a shell company which had transferred ownership to Mark less than a year ago. The loan guarantor, Sarah Carter, listed with my home address. I wasn't shocked. I just confirmed what I already knew. I located an old recording, a call Sarah had made while driving my car when her phone automatically synced to the Bluetooth system. She didn't notice. I didn't speak. But the car recorded everything. In the recording, she told Mark, "Don't worry, I'll get access to the account. Jim has no idea. We're fine." I didn't replay it. I didn't need to. Every word in that sentence was an order to mobilize. I saved the file to a USB drive and handed it to my lawyer. "Is this enough?" I asked. "More than enough," she said. That same day, I called the bank, froze all online access to my investment accounts, changed every password, revoked Sarah's power of attorney. I updated the beneficiaries on my insurance, disabled digital access to every shared financial service. I wasn't doing this to run. I was doing it to prepare for the final engagement, one I couldn't afford to lose. I printed all the evidence, sorted it into clear categories. 1. Core zone ownership transfer. 2. Loan guarantee documents. 3. Suspicious financial withdrawals. 4. Recorded phone conversation. Unauthorized account access history. I hadn't broken any laws. I had simply fortified my position with data, procedure, and the discipline of a commander who'd survived worse ambushes than this. I stopped at 3:00 a.m. Outside the window, the sky was black. No lights, no movement. Inside me, there was no grief, just clarity. The next morning, Sarah walked into the house as if everything were normal. She smiled faintly, asked if I wanted breakfast. I nodded. She didn't know everything was already done. The game only had a few moves left. I always thought that when the moment came to confront it all, I'd be furious. But when it finally arrived, I only felt one thing: clarity, sharp, surgical clarity. I walked out of my attorney's office with a full case file in hand. Emergency protection orders were approved. Account access revoked. Sarah's financial power of attorney formally terminated. All personal assets under my name had been locked under temporary legal protection. Every step logged, certified, time-stamped. I didn't move fast for shock value. I moved correctly, so nothing could be reversed. That evening, when Sarah came home, she acted normal. So did I. We had dinner, small talk about the weather, the news, a leadership article she'd emailed me earlier. I nodded at the right moments. I even smiled once or twice. She thought I didn't know. I let her believe that. The next morning, I met David at a barbershop near base. Nothing out of the ordinary. While waiting for my turn, he handed me a small envelope. Inside, copies of documents Sarah had signed to co-sign for Mark. Her signature, the dates, and, more importantly, my personal ID number misused to validate the loan. I don't need evidence anymore, I told him. I just need confirmation. David nodded, didn't say a word. We grew up together under the same roof where my father, a retired soldier, taught us both. When you know you've been hit, don't ask why. Ask, when is the right moment to hit back? I chose Friday, not by coincidence. That was the day Mark usually worked at Core Zone. I arrived unannounced, wearing field fatigues, no weapon, no backup, just a sealed envelope and a stare that needed no explanation. Mark stepped out of his office when he saw me, his face drained. I've never seen anyone swallow so hard that fast. "This is a funding cease order," I said, handing him the envelope. "From now on, any transfers from Sarah Carter to Core Zone will be reviewed for legal violations." He didn't say a word, just held the envelope in both hands like it might explode. "I won't come back," I added, "unless you give me a reason to." Then I turned and walked away. Didn't look back. A few people at the gym glanced at me. I didn't care. In the military, sometimes all it takes is showing up, on time, in uniform, and an entire front shifts under your boots. 2 days later, Sarah's attorney sent a letter. The tone had changed. No more posturing. It was a request for negotiation, amicable resolution, good faith dialogue. I didn't respond. I forwarded everything to my lawyer with one clear instruction: maintain control, no concessions, no side doors. That evening, Sarah knocked on my office door. "Jim," she said softly, "I think we should talk." I didn't look up. I was staring at a map, not of terrain, a map of assets, accounts, and exposure points. "Things got out of hand," she continued. I didn't know Mark would pull me in this deep." Still, I said nothing. She waited for a reaction, but I didn't give her rage, or blame, or mercy, only silence, the kind that comes from a commander who has fortified his perimeter and is now waiting for the war to end. She backed out, closed the door gently. I kept studying the map, not for retreat lines, but to decide where I would build the next wall. This time, not for a unit, for myself. I filed for divorce on a Monday morning. No message, no warning, just a formal packet delivered through official channels, from my lawyer's office to hers. I didn't need her to know now beforehand. I only needed her to know at the right time. That afternoon, Sarah called 3 times. I didn't answer. That evening, she came home early. The door opened harder than usual. I was cleaning my sidearm, not for any particular reason, just out of habit. She stood in the kitchen doorway, eyes red. "What did you send my lawyer?" she asked, voice tense. "The only thing you still deserve," I said. My voice wasn't loud, wasn't cold, just final. "You really want to end it like this?" "No, but you chose how it started." She didn't argue. Any justification now would only make it worse. The next morning, the asset division process began. The court accepted my request for emergency protection orders, freezing all asset transfers, locking accounts tied to core zone, initiating a financial review of all contracts. Sarah was ordered to submit her full financial records from the last 24 months. My attorney read the ruling and said, "This isn't a divorce anymore. This is an audit." I didn't nod. I wasn't pleased. Victory in this context meant losing less. 1 week later, David informed me that Mark Jenkins had stepped down from his role at Core Zone. No press release, no explanation, just a resignation form filed quietly. I printed it, filed it under Civil Ops Domestic Campaign. I'd fought this mission alone, but I hadn't lost. That evening, Sarah appeared at the doorway to my office again. This time, she didn't knock. "Jim, what do you want?" she asked. No defiance this time, just fear. I looked at her. For the first time in months, I didn't see a woman I once loved. I saw a man who'd been betrayed and survived. "I don't want anything. You already took it." She stepped closer. Her eyes glistened. Her voice cracked. "I know I was wrong, but can we try again?" I didn't reply, not because I was unsure, because in the military, silence is sometimes the best way to avoid wasting ammunition. "You still love me, don't you?" she whispered. Not a question, more like a tactical test of control. I stood up, looked her straight in the eyes. Love doesn't mean you don't retreat, and forgiveness doesn't include renewing treaties with those who broke the alliance. Sarah stood there, unsure whether to sit or leave. The silence in the room made the ticking clock sound like distant gunfire. I let her stand, not out of cruelty, but to make it clear this was no longer her battlefield. "I don't want to lose you," she said softly. "Not for the money, because you're the only person I ever truly trusted." I didn't laugh, but something in me almost did, not because what she said was wrong, but because it came far too late. "I'm not someone you get to maneuver anymore," I replied. "This war, you chose your side a long time ago." She lowered herself onto the edge of a chair, shoulders trembling but voice measured. "If you want, I'll return everything, the shares, the accounts, the gym. I don't need any of it." I listened, each word, each breath. Then I slid a file across the table. "The divorce agreement. You can keep what you built, if anything was built without me." She took it, hands shaking. She didn't sign, but she understood. The game was over, and for once, she wasn't writing the rules. That night, I left the house alone. No destination, just space to let my instincts lead, like I had during night ops in unfamiliar terrain. For the first time in years, I let my body decide the path. I ended up in a small park near the base. A bench I used to sit on after deployments, reading, decompressing. I sat there again, spine straight, fingers laced. I didn't think about Sarah or Mark. I thought about the day I first signed my service papers, how I believed in honor and discipline as the twin pillars holding up my life. Sarah couldn't destroy that, but she made me weaponize those same pillars against her. The next day, Sarah signed, quietly, no notes. She left the file on the kitchen counter next to a full cup of coffee and her car keys. No goodbye. I didn't walk her to the door. The campaign was complete. 3 days later, the court approved my motion for exclusive financial control. Every remaining joint asset was legally placed under my discretion. Core Zone was reappraised. According to records, Mark had sold off his remaining stake to avoid legal fallout. I wasn't joyful, but I was light. Back at my desk, I opened the drawer, pulled out the folder labeled Domestic Emergency Response Plan. I burned it page by page, line by line, not because I forgot, but because it had done its job. I didn't need revenge. I just needed an ending that didn't cost me any more of myself. I never saw Sarah again after the final signing. She left everything per the agreement. The car keys, the equity transfer papers, the passwords to the auxiliary accounts. Each item placed neatly on the table, like a quiet surrender. No note, no flowers, no apology. She left like a soldier who'd lost a battle, silent, without souvenirs, and without laying any final traps. 7 days later, the court ratified the file. The divorce was legally binding. The house was now entirely mine. Corzone entered a restructuring phase. Neither Sarah nor Mark's names appeared in any of the filings. I didn't care where they went, only that they didn't return to this theater of war. I cleaned out my desk, took down the wedding photo that had been pinned behind the door, filed all documents related to the case into a separate drawer, one not shared with anything related to operations or personnel. A week later, David came by. He brought 2 cans of beer and silence. We sat outside. The weather was neither hot nor cold, just wind and rustling leaves. He didn't ask if I was okay. I didn't say I was. Some men don't speak in words. They speak by sitting beside you. So, David asked after a while, what now? I looked out at the front yard where the grass had grown past ankle height. I think it's time to relocate the command post. David smiled faintly. He knew I wasn't talking about moving houses. I was talking about exiting an internal campaign, about stepping away from the defensive posture that had defined my life for the past year. I didn't move right away, but I did shift my rhythm. I woke up earlier, ate meals on schedule, cleaned out old equipment I no longer needed. I dismantled the security system I'd installed after Sarah left. There was nothing left to defend the same way anymore. That night, I opened the folder labeled Domestic Contingency Plan, not to revise it, but to store it away deep in the safe. I didn't burn it like some people might to make a symbolic gesture. I kept it, creased, annotated, used, not for reuse, but as proof I survived once, and once was enough. One morning I received an invitation to return to the military academy, a command-level strategy course, the same one I'd taught 3 years ago before stepping away for personal reasons. I didn't respond right away. I left the letter sitting on my desk for 3 days, right next to the field lighter I'd brought back from Syria, the only non-functional thing I kept, not for use, but for memory. On the 4th day, I signed, no hesitation. I wasn't going back out of nostalgia. I was going because I needed a new operational framework, a place where rules still mattered, where discipline was still currency, where betrayal wasn't baked into the system. My first morning back, I stood before a class of 22 cadets, all in uniform, faces still clean, posture rigid, eyes steady. I didn't speak for the first 5 minutes. I let the silence sit, like an unissued order hovering in the air. Then I asked, if an operation fails not because of the enemy but because of internal breach, what's your first move? No one answered right away. I waited. Finally, a young officer raised his hand. You identify the breach, lock down access, remove compromised authority. I nodded. Correct. But before that, you must first decide if the mission is still worth continuing. Silence again. I didn't teach them theory. I gave them what was real, that in every system, from military units to marriages, there will be moments when the fracture comes from within, and when it does, you don't ask why it happened. You ask whether it's worth rebuilding what broke. After class, I walked around the academy. Nothing had changed. The trees were still planted with military precision. The warning bell still rang on time. The bronze statue in front of the lecture hall still stood with that same blank-eyed stare, like it was watching for weakness in every direction. I stood there for a long time. The wind pulled at my collar. The sun angled low across the quad. No one spoke, and then I turned away. No salute, no looking back.